Iowa basketball has hit the transfer portal, and they've come up with an intriguing prospect. Seydou Traore has joined the Hawkeyes. Plus, we hear from the CEO of the Swarm Collective, Brad Heinrichs, all today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked on Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked on Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, a busy one here today as we got a lot going on. A little bit later on, Brad Heinrichs from the Swarm Collective had a conversation with him, talking a lot about some of the instances that has changed over the last 2 years of the Swarm, name, image, and likeness, what's going to happen in the future. A lot of different topics with Brad Heinrichs, and really excited to bring that one to all our great Hawkeye fans out there. But we kick things off today. Speaking of the Swarm Collective, well, hand in hand, bringing in a new recruit. The collective usually has a part of that, and Iowa has landed Manhattan transfer Seydou Traore. Now, pronunciation, we'll see. Search, didn't see anything. On the Manhattan website, didn't see anything. People talking exactly what it is. He'll help us out, though, I'm sure, and we'll be able to exactly get what the pronunciation is. Very intriguing prospect. So he played for a Manhattan team this past season that was not very good. Listed at 6'7", 215 pounds. As a whole, though, Manhattan went 7-23 overall last season, including going 4-16 in the Metro Athletic Conference. So we're not talking about high-level stuff here. We're not talking about a guy coming in that's played at a major conference, but I think a very intriguing player. Playing for a bad team, a potential, some bad habits start to show. But you look at some of the underlying numbers here that come from Traore, and I think they're incredibly exciting. One of the first ones that jump off the page, we saw a season ago. They went out and got Ben Krikke. And Ben Krikke was a very talented offensive player. On the defensive end, it was a struggle. And as bad as it was defensively, he might have been a worse rebounder for a big guy. Not the case here for Traore. 93rd, in the country in defensive rebounding rate, meaning of the available defensive rebounds out there when he's on the floor, he got those rebounds at the 93rd best mark in all of college basketball. We're talking about thousands of players, and he was in the top 100. That's good. Good defensive rates as well. Both block percentage and steal percentage very high. We know Iowa, under Fran McCaffrey, what it is, right? Short of a couple of years having a couple of good defenders on the perimeter with Mike Cassell and Zap Clemens, what they had on the back end with Adam Woodbury. More years than not, this is going to be a bad defensive team. But you add a guy that has some defensive upside, at the minimum, this is intriguing. Not only that, he also has 3 seasons to play. We're not talking about a one-and-done player. We're not talking about a guy coming in. This is a chance for some development. And you're looking now what Fran McCaffrey is building, what Iowa looks like next season. This is a team that is getting more athletic. We know what we saw at times from some of the guys a year ago. I think there's a real chance that we're going to see that athleticism take a big step forward. And here's a surprise for you. As we await the decision, what's going to happen with Payton Sandfort, right now at this point in time, Iowa is 48th in the country at Bart Torvik. Bart Torvik, one of the analytical sites out there that measure what teams are going to look like next season. He has the incoming freshman in there. He's got Traore in there. He's got the point guard Drew Thelwell, who committed here about a month back. All those guys are in there. And you're talking about, at that point, really a fringe NCAA tournament team. Now, also, you put in the consideration with that, Payton Sandfort is also a part of the mix. That is a big one that obviously leads this team to another level. I think if Sandfort comes back, that Iowa, yes, is going to be an NCAA tournament team. I believe at minimum that's what they're going to do. But you take Sandfort out of the mix, I think this is a completely different squad. I think they're on the outside looking in. In fact, if you take him out of his analytical profile, they go from the 49th team in the country down to 68th in the country, and you're well beaten at that point of being an NCAA tournament team. So that's where we are at this point in time. I think an intriguing one, excitement when you talk about the roster, athleticism. You have it obviously with Traore, Dembele, Laje Dembele. We saw a lot of him. Owen Freeman, definitely a plus guy. Josh Dix doesn't back down from anybody in terms of athleticism. I think he's at a really high rate. Now, what can you get out of a Brock Harding? What are we going to see from the freshmen this year in Cooper Koch and Chris Taggio? This is a team starting to be built a little bit different. Are they a guard short? Perhaps. Are they going to play a little bit bigger this season? Either be it Freeman at the power forward position, either Dembele or Traore, or even one of the freshmen at the power forward spot. Do you go another direction and do you have Sandfort play the 3, Dix at the 2, and then figure out between Thelwell and Harding who's your point guard going to be? It's an intriguing mix at minimum. And I understand the way that this season ended this past year. It was frustrating, right? I think we were all at the end of the season, the way it went, with the opportunities that the Hawkeyes had at the end of the season and potential punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament. You have the opportunity against Illinois. You don't show up. You get blown off your home floor and weren't in the game from really the opening jump ball. Then you come back in the Big Ten tournament. You get shot out of the gym by Ohio State. The way that it ended left a really sour taste, I know, in a lot of Hawkeye fans' mouths. But also remember what Fran McCaffrey has done with this program. In the previous 5 seasons, they were an NCAA tournament team. Yes, no Sweet 16s. Yes, only 2 victories in the NCAA tournament. One of those as a 2 seed one year, one as a 10 seed. I get it. There's been upsets, the frustration that comes with that. Fran can coach. We can argue about the defense and what needs to improve and what needs to happen. But if Sandfort comes back, they got a chance. And that is what we continue to see at this point in time. The workouts have not gone well for Payton Sandfort. And the 2 scrimmage games that he has played didn't get a lot of opportunities. And when he did, he wasn't able to knock down shots. That's a concern. You couple that with the measurables. We're not at a high level for him. You're left where we are. Sandfort comes back. This is a tournament team. If not, I don't know what else is in the portal. I need to do a little bit more shopping. We continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes. Time to hear from the Swarm CEO. He is Brad Heinrichs, who joins us as we will talk a little bit about what's happening in the Swarm Collective, what you can do to help Iowa athletics and these student athletes, and a whole lot more. We'll get into that as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, futures, and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon for your chance right now to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Let's get Brad Heinrich in here from the Hawkeye Swarm. He's the face of it. Brad, my name's Ken Miller, my partner Trent Condon. Good to meet you, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm actually doing some work for my real job down here in the Bahamas. And so it's nice to come into the air conditioning and talk to you guys.
So let me start there. How do you get to do a real job in the Bahamas? That's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of consulting surrounding the country's pension plan. I'm a pension actuary.
Are you? Okay, nice. Well done. Well, it's good to have your background. Certainly going to come in handy with the Swarm. I guess where I want to start with you is just how much has it changed it's still relatively new, seemingly.
Yeah.
How much has it changed? I mean, it seems like the dollar figures keep going up and up and up. Is that the biggest change? Or I guess from when you started to where we're at now, what's been the biggest change?
I'd say, well, obviously the dollar figures going up has been a change. That was probably more of an expected change. The other changes that have happened that have been significant are that, it seemed as if we had a few rules when we started. But the rules that we did have were absolutely ridiculous. Like, for example, the rule was, okay, Brad, you're not allowed to incent a student athlete to come to the University of Iowa with NIL money. And furthermore, you're not allowed to incent a student athlete to stay at the University of Iowa with NIL money. Now you think about how stupid that is.
Really?
I try to get you guys to change jobs, and I have to tell you, well, here's the deal. I can't tell you how much I'm going to pay you until you show up. Who does that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a rule that I was, that I scratched my head at, and most collectives completely ignored. But it's difficult, right? When I've got Iowa compliance tell me here are the rules, and then
Gary Bartle hanging over your head.
Everybody else is breaking these rules, so that caused me a big sweat. But since there have been some lawsuits against the NCAA, and in particular, I think the Tennessee case, there was an injunction that has basically wiped out some of these ridiculous rules. So now there really aren't any rules. What rules that we had are now gone. Yeah. Now it is truly the wild, wild west. But I have some intel that the whole world may be changing in the next 30 days in terms of what the rules are. So we'll see what happens. But it's a different kind of atmosphere than it was 2 years ago, and certainly different than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Brad, is the end game going to eventually become this is all handled in-house? The athletic department will have their NIL, and all these collectives across the country will go, I guess, in-house. Is that the most likely scenario of how this eventually plays out? Or is there still going to be a spot for you guys with the Swarm and being it a separate entity, if you will?
I think the answer is both. I think that you're right, and that this will be taken in-house to an extent, right? And I think that there'll be revenue sharing with the student athletes, and each institution is going to get whatever revenue they get, whether it's from TV or donors or whatever else, and they're going to decide how they want to, split it up, and there'll be a salary cap, if you will, for each player, or actually maybe not for each player, but for each program. And so I see it going that way. However, there's still going to be a need for collectives or organizations that are out trying to help the student athletes get deals on the side. I mean, for the Caitlin Clarks of the world, for sure, right? I mean, she was the poster child for what NIL was supposed to be. Yeah. I mean, she had every right to get paid by State Farm last year, and Gatorade or Powerade or whichever one she picked, and then Hy-Vee and and Bose and Farmers, all these other organizations that use her name, image, and likeness on commercials to market their products. So there's going to be a need for organizations like ours to help create opportunities for student athletes. But I also agree that and believe that this will go in-house probably in the next couple of years would be my best guess.
Well, Caitlin Clark was the poster child for all things good. Caden Proctor would have been the poster child for what this isn't supposed to be, right? So how much did he hurt you perception-wise? Because, there's people that, gosh darn it, I don't want to do this. My hard-earned money, blah, blah, blah. Now I paid the season tickets. I got to do this. How much did Proctor hurt you, Brad? Or not just you, maybe collectives across the country?
Well, I think that it sort of gave some fuel to the fire that some people had that were the naysayers and believe that this whole NIL thing is ridiculous and these kids don't have any business making money, right?
Yep.
Guy gets paid to do a quick commercial, gets paid a bunch of money and then leaves, and obviously the organization that paid him didn't get any value out of. In fact, they probably suffered as much as anybody.
True.
But you're right. I mean, there are some people though that are looking for a reason not to give, and that was a pretty good one for some. To say, hey, I'm not giving any money. You got these kinds of people that are just going to take my money and run. Turns out that there weren't any individuals that donated money that he got. So he didn't get any
Right.
Hawkeye fans money. He just got some corporate money. But if he'd have stuck around a little bit longer, he absolutely would have gotten some of that, and so he certainly gave the whole transfer portal and all that really a bad name, and I think a lot of Iowans got pretty frustrated and disappointed in one of their fellow statesmen, I guess, that he would do what he did.
Brad, the perception that I see out there, football going very good with the Swarm Collective, what they did.
Yeah.
You guys worked to do in the portal a year ago, and then this year keeping all those 5th and 6th year guys around. Women's basketball, Lucy Olson coming aboard. But it's the men's basketball that maybe is struggling the most out of the most visible sports out there. Is that a fair characterization? And is it bad as times, I guess maybe social media makes it sound for men's basketball and what they can do in the portal?
I don't think it's necessarily bad. Mm-hmm. It's I think that your characterization of football is right in that we've been very successful. In fact, I think if you ask Kirk Ferentz, he would tell you. In fact, I was with Kirk yesterday, and I asked him about his impressions of our work in the transfer portal over the last couple of years, and he says it's been a huge net positive for the program. So I know he believes that. I think that Lisa Bluter and now Jan Jensen would agree that it's been a positive for us as well, especially with the addition of Lucy coming. And by the way, I think she's still coming, just so you know.
Yeah.
Right.
But with men's basketball, we got Cricky last year. He was a good player, and we've got a couple of guys coming in from the portal this year. The hard part that we have is that we've got sports at our university that garner support, and we're not just a football school. We're not just a basketball school. There's some schools out there. Like I'll give you an example. In basketball, in the transfer portal, we might be competing against Creighton for a player. Mm-hmm. And 5 years ago, you might say Creighton versus the Big Ten.
Right.
We got to have something over those guys, right? I mean, we're a bigger, badder organization, so to speak. But now with NIL, Creighton doesn't have football.
Nope.
So every dime that goes into the NIL program for Creighton is stockpiled to help them get to attract and retain basketball players. So you're going to see over the next few years, and you've already started to see it, schools like Creighton, looking pretty strong, Gonzaga, Xavier, your Providence, St. John, all these Georgetown, these schools that don't have Xavier, don't have football. They're going to have a competitive advantage in the basketball landscape.
Excellent point.
So it's not that we're doing poorly with basketball. It's not that there's a crisis. Do I wish we were doing better? Of course. I wish we were doing better with all of them. I mean, I want to compete against Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I want to beat the big boys. I want to be a big boy. And so I've got very high expectations, but with basketball, there's some sort of embedded challenges that exist that make it tougher sledding for us than it does for some other schools.
You mentioned Ohio State. Saw the report last week about the much is just coming out of the or money is being invested in the quarterback room.
Yeah, how about that?
It's absolutely incredible. Sue, who are the haves in the Big Ten Conference? I got to imagine Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State. Is there one that would surprise us that their collective is their war chest, if you will, is completely full, like it competes with Ohio State?
Yes. Our friends to the west.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. That's all they have. That's all they have.
Nebraska. Yeah. Nebraska has a war chest. They've got. It seems like they've got money to burn over there.
Wow.
And so I don't expect that sleeping giant to be down for very long. I hate to say that. Yeah. I hope we continue to drub them in football and that never changes. I just hope for that. But I will tell you that if you're looking at dollars and cents, they're going to be difficult to ignore over the long term. They're one. Penn State is actually probably not as strong as you might think from an NIL perspective. In fact, I think they lost a basketball coach to Notre Dame because their NIL program wasn't very strong.
Wow.
Ohio State for sure. Michigan, they do a good job. They're a little bit. I don't think their NIL program is as strong as their teams seem to be, at least with football. But it's they've had a really good run, so that helps, right? But there's schools like Indiana that for football really aren't that strong from an NIL perspective. But gosh, for basketball, they're a lot of their fans want their resources to go towards basketball. They're a traditional blue blood in basketball. And you're starting to see that across the country. I mean, Kansas in basketball, not football. Indiana basketball. And so you may see as this continues to evolve, there's only so much money out there from fan bases. You may start to see schools really start to specialize in a particular sport. That's a guess. That's not necessarily, a fact, but I'm starting to see that a little bit.
All right, Brad, we have this perception of the way things are done, but it could be completely wrong. Show us how the sausage is made here. Kirk wants a player out of the portal. There's a guy in the portal. There is mutual interest, but you guys get involved. Just take us through the steps of how this all goes when you're setting up like somebody from the portal.
You're talking about a portal kid. Think of it like if one of you guys decided you think you may want to switch jobs. Okay. You may have a recruiter help you, right? You may I don't know if they've got recruiters for your line of work, but most places do have some sort of, people that call them all the time and ask how happy you are, right?
Yeah.
I like to call them headhunters, which is really sort of an ugly term, but in this case, these guys have agents, and these agents will say, "How happy are you?" And they may say, "Well, I think I should be playing more, or they need to throw me the ball more, or whatever else, right?" And how much are they paying you? Obviously, the agent knows. Well, then the agent, if the agent thinks that their player may be swayed, they'll start sending out feelers, right? And sometimes they'll call me. I'll be like, "Well, it's not even the portal. It's not worth talking about,
Yeah.
But a lot of them are wondering, But then when the kid hits the portal, the agent may call me. The kid will find out, get my number. It's easy to find out. And they'll call me. Usually not the kid. It's usually an agent that calls me. If both sides are singing Kumbaya together, meaning the player and the program, then it's really kind of up for me to make sure that both parties get what they want and that we can have equity in our roster. Because what I will tell you, which is somewhat unfortunate, unlike maybe the professional world where I may not know how much the person in the cube makes across from me or next to me, these kids all talk. So you got to be careful that you don't want to pay some kid more than the other kid who's clearly producing higher, because then one kid becomes disgruntled. So you got to make sure that you do a really good job with your roster and making it equitable. And so I don't know if that gives you any insight, but that's a lot of how it works. I mean, I do get involved in portal stuff, usually towards the end. Now, there's also portal kids that where NIL doesn't matter, or he or she knows that they're really not good. They're just a roster spot, so to speak, and they're not going to probably be able to demand a lot of money. They may not contact me at all to find out what their opportunities are. And so you can get both kinds, depending upon what type of kid we're talking about.
Brad Heinrichs, CEO of the Swarm Collective. My last thing for you: how was your life changed with Beth Getz now in charge of the athletic department?
Oh, she's a breath of fresh air. I love Beth Getz. She is progressive, and that maybe sounds like it's depending upon who you are. That may scare some people off by saying that she's progressive. I would consider her to be very self-aware. not just of her actions, but also just what the college sports landscape is. She knows how important NIL is. She knows that for us to be successful, football, basketball, or maybe even other sports, we've got to have a successful NIL program. And we only have one at Iowa, which is the Swarm. So, she has gone to great lengths. She's come down to my house to meet with me in Florida. Not when it's, cold in Iowa. I mean, she comes down when it's nice and humidity here. Yeah. To meet with me, to see what she can do to help us.
That's awesome.
And that means a lot. I think she's going to be incredibly successful. We're very lucky to have her. And, I'm very excited for what the future holds with her at the helm.
Brad Heinrichs, the CEO of the Hawkeye Swarm, joining us here as we talk a little bit more about it. You can find out more information about the Iowa Swarm, how you can get involved in every different direction. iowaswarm.com is the website for that. And big thank you to Brad Heinrichs for joining us. We continue Iowa baseball. They're here in Des Moines. We'll talk about what they need to do in the 3-game set against Florida International from Principal Park and who's going to get the ball in game 1 coming up this evening down at the big ball field. We'll do that as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hey, are you watching FS1 or ESPN all day long? You have to turn down the volume because all that shouting back and forth. Well, it's time for you to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day. It's going to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your team is the Hawkeyes, and we continue to break things down. Now, the series this weekend against Florida International in baseball doesn't mean anything. Iowa is locked in with their record in the Big Ten. The RPI cannot improve enough for them to be an at-large team in the NCAA tournament. It's about getting your pitching rotation set, getting everything right, and you go from there. Brody Brecht gets the ball in game 1. It'll be Cade Obermueller in game 2, and then we'll see about Marcus Morgan and what has been, in many different ways, a very difficult season for him and what that's going to mean. But with Brody Brecht, I don't anticipate you're going to see him up there, approaching 100 pitches, anything like that. Get that pitch count pretty low, is 60, 70, try to rein it in. You go from there and then get those bullpen arms a little bit of work. No midweek game this week. Their game against UIC was canceled. So not a whole lot here. Hey, it's fun to have the Hawkeyes in Des Moines. I'm sure there's going to be a good crowd on hand, but it's all about next week in the Big Ten tournament and having this team peak at the right time. You're not going to kick the games away. You're not just going to say, we'll go out there and put in a bunch of the bench guys. No, you want to have these guys sharp because the only way in a preseason top 20 team, the only way they're making the big dance is to win the Big Ten tournament. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We got one more coming your way this week. We got more on the portal, the hiring of Jan Jensen, her press conference ran out of time today. We will get into that tomorrow and a whole lot more. Get you set for the weekend. Maybe got a little mowing on the agenda. You can have me in your ears. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, and go Hawks.